Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Now on that same day, 2 disciples were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see him." Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, he blessed and broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour, they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told him what had happened on the road and how he had been known to them in the breaking of the bread. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. The Gospel of Luke, which we just read from, is much less focused on theology and much more focused on reality than the other 3 synoptic Gospels. And you can see that particularly in the post-resurrection stories from Luke. Luke tells the stories of the disciples who get frightened because they think Jesus was a ghost, the disciples who want to touch his wounds, the disciples who eat broiled fish with him. And one of the very best examples of the reality of the Gospels is this reading that we just heard about the 2 disciples encountering Jesus on the road to Emmaus and failing to recognize him until they invited him in to eat with them. until they recognized him in the breaking of the bread, which is exactly what we do every Sunday. We recognize Jesus in the breaking of the bread. There was this old priest, and he had this really small little country parish. And so on Easter Sunday, he once told his parishioners that gathered for Easter worship, he said, "So how would it be if instead of greeting you this morning with our traditional Easter greeting, Alleluia, he is risen, what if I had said, Happy Easter, now go home and you will see Jesus." And before they all bolted for the door, he managed to stop them. And he said, no, I'm really, don't leave. I'm just paraphrasing. I'm paraphrasing the words of Jesus to the women at the tomb. Happy Easter, meaning I'm here, I'm alive. Now go be my witnesses. Go, tell people, show them, tell them I'm alive. Tell them you've seen me. That stone wasn't rolled away from the tomb so that Jesus could get out. All he had to do was walk out. He could have walked right through it. He walked through walls, he walked through locked doors. The stone wasn't rolled away to let Jesus out. The stone was rolled away so we could see in. So that we could see with our very own eyes, the tomb is empty. So that we could see with our very selves, our very beings, there is no death. There's only life. The stone was rolled away so that we could be witnesses. Go home. Go home and see Jesus. The resurrection story wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big production. There wasn't a big spectacle. There weren't trumpets. There weren't angel choirs. There was no flash of light or thunder. There were no voices from the sky. The resurrection story, it wasn't the public horror of the crucifixion. The resurrection story. The resurrection story is quiet. The resurrection story is an empty tomb, a gardener, and a couple of women. Early morning glory. Quiet. Still. Go home. Go home and see Jesus. Jesus sent the disciples home just like he sent Mary home. Go home and tell what you have seen. He sent the disciples home to Galilee, where they saw him, where they had a royal fish barbecue on the beach with him, on the beach where he first called them to follow him and to be his witness. Luke's very clear. Luke, more than any other gospel, is very clear. The encounters with Jesus are from the ordinary flesh and blood world of everyday life, among ordinary people doing ordinary things, like having a fish fry on the beach, like lingering in the early morning dew in a garden, like walking along a dusty road. And the disciples, just like we do, they missed the point. They missed it. They failed on so many occasions to see Jesus in their midst. They failed to see him in the ordinary. They failed to open their eyes. They failed because it was too ordinary. Why would Jesus be on that dusty road? Why would Jesus be on the beach? They failed to open their eyes and they missed him. And I remember walking the road to Emmaus. We didn't walk it very far because it's a really busy highway right now and we'd probably get killed. But I remember walking the last little bit of it that leads up to this beautiful monastery that marks the spot where it is said that Jesus and the two disciples went in and had dinner. And I remember in that monastery seeing this painting. And it was a picture of the road to Emmaus. And it showed the two disciples. It showed them walking with Jesus. And one is looking straight at him, but with this totally blank look. And the other one's walking head down, eyes on the ground. That'd be me, afraid I'm gonna trip on a pebble or something. Not looking. The other one looking, but not seeing. How often do we do that? How often do we fail to recognize Christ in our midst because we simply won't open our eyes? We remain so lost in our own thoughts, our own worries, our own lives, that we miss Jesus, standing right in front of us, walking right along with us. Think about it. Think about a time when you did open your eyes, when you did, and you truly did feel the presence of Jesus. And it might not have been in church. It might have been in the produce aisle at the grocery store. It might have been in times of sorrow. It might have been in times of joy. But somehow or other, somehow you stepped outside of yourself and your own thoughts, your own worries, your own fears, and somehow you saw Jesus. Maybe you didn't see him. Maybe you felt him. Maybe you sensed him. Maybe you saw him reflected in the eyes of another. But you saw Jesus. Because when we become so self-absorbed in the worries of our lives that we miss the wonder of our lives, then we fail to see him. And we fail to see him, we fail to see the needs of others standing right among us. Jesus called his disciples as witnesses. And that's what he calls us to do. He calls us today. Now the odds are pretty good. We're probably not going to be called to die in his name, as so many of those early disciples were. But we are absolutely, beyond the shadow of a doubt, called to live in his name. We're called to open our eyes. We're called to open our eyes and see Jesus. And see Jesus in the world around us. To see Jesus as we feed the hungry, bring justice to the persecuted, show hospitality to the frightened, as we listen to the lonely. Jesus never once missed those cries. He didn't miss the cries of the sick, the friendless, the needy, the grieving. But how often we, because we ourselves are so sad, miss the cries around us. How often are we so blinded by our own grief, our own loss, our own loneliness, our own fears, our own worries, that we fail to hear the cries of others, even if they're standing right next to us. Notice, the disciples walking on the road to Emmaus didn't recognize Jesus. They didn't recognize him when all they were doing was walking. They didn't recognize him until they did something Jesus would do. They invited him in. They invited a stranger in for dinner, for no other reason than he looked hungry. And that road to Emmaus is 7 miles. I love when it talks about the disciples going back and forth. That's a lot of going back and forth. That's a long road. He looked tired. He looked thirsty. He looked hungry. They invited him in. They said, stay and have dinner. And then they saw it was getting dark and those roads weren't safe. And they said, stay with us. It's not safe out there. They didn't see Christ until their actions were Christ-like. Which brings us here. Post-resurrection. listening with the disciples as the risen Lord calls us to be his witnesses out there in that real world, in that unsafe world, in that hurting world. Go home. Go home and see Jesus. See him in your shut-in neighbor, your grieving friend, your sick relative. See him in the eyes of the helpless ones, children, animals, the disabled, the poor, the forgotten. Go home and see Jesus. God loved us to death, which means he also loved us to life. Resurrection wasn't one isolated event that happened a couple thousand years ago. Resurrection is our life. We are people of the resurrection. Resurrection is Jesus. It's Jesus coming right here into this place, appearing in our midst. Jesus is visible, not by what we know, not by what we believe, but by what we do. Go home and see Jesus. Go home and let others experience in you, in the warmth and the welcome that you give. Let them experience the warmth and the welcome of the love of God. In you, let others find the hospitality and the acceptance of Jesus. In you, let others get a glimpse of that spirit that is impossible to kill. And I think the person who probably said it best was Mother Teresa. She probably did it best, too. And after her death, these words were found scrawled on the wall of her home for children in Calcutta. And this is what they said. People are often unreasonable, illogical, and self-centered. Forgive them anyway. If you are kind, people may accuse you of selfish motives. Be kind anyway. If you are successful, you'll win some false friends and you'll win some true enemies. Succeed anyway. If you are honest and frank, people may cheat you. Be honest and frank anyway. What you spend years building, someone could destroy overnight. Build anyway. If you find serenity and happiness, they may be jealous. Be happy anyway. The good you do today, people will forget tomorrow. Do good anyway. Give the world the best you have, and it will never be enough. Give the world the best you have anyway. You see, in the final analysis, it is between you and your God. It was never between you and them. Anyway, go home. Go home. Be witnesses. Go tell it. Go live it. Go become it. And see Jesus.